Hey guys, tonight we delve into the hushed world of the traditional Japanese tea ceremony, specifically focusing on the surprisingly strict, almost comically precise, etiquette surrounding it during the Edo period. Imagine stepping back in time, not as a mighty samurai lord, let's be honest, the paperwork alone would be a nightmare, but as a guest, invited to partake in this deeply symbolic ritual. Picture yourself navigating a maze of unspoken rules where lifting a teacup the wrong way could be a social fox pas of epic proportions. You're about to enter a space designed for ultimate tranquility, yet buzzing with potential tiny mistakes. Frankly, given the sheer density of rules we're about to uncover, you probably wouldn't survive your first ceremony without causing some minor international incident, or at least deeply offending your host with an improperly admired flower arrangement. It's intense. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps the channel find other sleepy history enthusiasts like us. Also, drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far these little journeys reach. It's always fascinating to picture someone drifting off in Tokyo while another is just waking up in Toronto. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The experience doesn't begin in the tea room itself. Oh no, that would be far too abrupt, too unrefined. It starts outside in a carefully constructed transition zone, the tea garden, known as the Roji. Picture yourself arriving, leaving the bustling sounds and worries of the outside world behind you, whether that's the clatter of Edo, period merchants, or, the existential dread of your phone's notification chime. You stand at the entrance to the Roji, often a simple gate, sometimes just a subtle shift in landscaping. This isn't just any garden path. It's designed to cleanse your mind, to prepare you for the profound simplicity waiting within the chashitsu, the tea room. The word Roji itself literally translates to dewy ground. Doesn't that just sound peaceful? It evokes an image of cool morning freshness, of nature untouched and pure. This name, and the garden style itself, really gained prominence thanks to the legendary tea master Sen no Riki in the 16th century. He championed the wabi-sabi aesthetic, finding beauty in imperfection, impermanence, and simplicity, and the Roji became a physical embodiment of that philosophy. It's meant to feel rustic, almost like a mountain path, deliberately separating you from the mundane. So, you take your first step onto the path. It's likely paved with tobi-ishi or stepping stones. These aren't laid out in a neat, uniform line like a modern walkway. They're deliberately irregular, uneven in size and spacing. You actually have to watch your step, forcing a kind of walking meditation. Each foot placement requires attention, drawing your focus downward, inward, away from distracting thoughts. You can't just walk through the Roji while mentally composing your grocery list. Historians still argue whether the deliberately uneven spacing of the stepping stones was purely practical for drainage on rainy days, or a profound Zen statement on life's unpredictable and often challenging path. Maybe it was both. Or perhaps the designer just had a surplus of oddly shaped rocks. We may never know for sure. As you proceed, notice the plants. You won't find beds of bright, showy flowers here. The aesthetic leans towards muted greens and textures, moss clinging to stones, evergreen shrubs, perhaps some bamboo rustling softly in a breeze that seems to exist only within these garden walls. The goal isn't visual fireworks, it's tranquility. The subdued palette encourages introspection. You might pass by a churiana, a small square dust pit, often lined with bamboo and containing a few fallen leaves. This isn't just sloppy gardening, it's symbolic. It represents the discarding of the dust of the worldly concerns, a place to mentally leave your ego and everyday worries before entering the sacred space of the tea room. It's like a tiny, very aesthetic spiritual bin. Imagine trying to explain that to your local council's garden waste collection service. The air feels different here. Cooler, perhaps, under the shade of carefully placed trees. Damp earth and moss release a gentle, loamy scent. You might hear the subtle trickle of water. Often, partway along the Roji, you'll encounter a stone water basin called a Sumidemae. This isn't just decorative, it's for ritual purification. We'll get more into the specifics of using it later, but its presence reinforces the theme of cleansing. The basin is typically low to the ground, forcing you to crouch or kneel, fostering humility. Everything about the Roji encourages a slowing down, a shedding of status and pretense. It's so quiet, you might start to notice sounds you'd normally ignore, the buzz of an insect, the distant call of a bird, maybe the sound of your own breathing becoming slower, more regular. So quiet you can almost hear your own anxieties whispering about whether you left the metaphorical Edo, period gas lamp on back home. You continue along the path, perhaps passing a simple waiting arbor, the Kaiseki Machiai, where guests might gather briefly before the host appears. But for now, you walk alone, the garden working its subtle magic, the carefully orchestrated naturalness, the forced mindfulness of the stepping stones. The symbolism embedded in every element, it's all designed to bring you into the right frame of mind. You're not just walking to a building, you're undertaking the first stage of a ritual, transitioning from the profane to the sacred, from the complex outer world to the intense, focused simplicity of the tea ceremony. The path is short in distance, but long in psychological effect. You feel calmer, more present, even if slightly nervous about the intricate rules ahead. The dew on the moss seems to hold the quiet coolness of the morning. Even if it's afternoon, you finally approach the tea house proper, a structure that, from the outside, often looks deliberately humble, rustic, blending seamlessly with the garden you've just traversed. The real performance is about to begin, starting with how you even get through the door. You've reached the tea house, the chashitsu. It stands unassuming, perhaps with earthen walls, bamboo accents, and a simple thatched or tiled roof, looking less like a grand destination and more like a tranquil hermit's hut. Your eyes scan for the entrance, expecting something, well, door-like. Instead, you spot it, an opening low down on the wall, looking more like an access hatch for a particularly well-behaved badger than an entrance for esteemed guests. This is the Nijiriguchi, the infamous crawling-in entrance, and yes, you are expected to use it. Its dimensions are almost startlingly small. Typically, it's only about 2 feet high and slightly wider, roughly 60 by 65 centimeters. Think about that. It's intentionally designed so that no one, regardless of their social standing, be they a powerful daimyo lord, a wealthy merchant, or even just, well, you can enter standing upright. Forget dignity, forget making a grand entrance. You have to humble yourself physically to get inside. This is the core philosophy made manifest inside the tea room. Everyone is theoretically equal. The carefully constructed hierarchy of Edo society, with its rigid bows and seating arrangements, is meant to be left outside, shed like dusty sandals along with your worldly concerns in the Roji garden. It's a powerful architectural statement. Sen no Rikit, that giant of tea history we met metaphorically in the garden, is often credited with popularizing, if not inventing, this specific type of entrance. The idea was radical, forcing samurai who lived and died by their status and the swords that represented it to stoop low, effectively disarming themselves symbolically before entering this space dedicated to peace and contemplation. It was a quiet rebellion against the ostentation and violence of the age. So how exactly do you navigate this human-sized cat flap? First, you kneel outside on a designated stone. If you were a samurai, let's just pretend for a moment you possess that level of stoic coolness and aren't currently worrying if your knees will survive this. You would first carefully remove your swords. The long katana and the shorter wakizashi were the symbols of your rank and your martial prowess. Leaving them outside, usually placed carefully on a designated sword rack katanakekid, often located under the eaves near the entrance, was a non-negotiable part of the process. It signaled your willingness to leave conflict and status behind. Imagine the psychological weight of that gesture for someone whose entire identity was tied to those blades. For everyone else, it's more about the physical act of humbling yourself. Okay, back to you, the slightly bewildered guest. Kneeling before the tiny opening, you place your hands on the threshold. Then you gently slide yourself in, usually headfirst. It's not exactly a graceful dive. Think more of a controlled shuffle or wiggle. You have to lower your head, contract your shoulders, and move with a deliberate lack of haste. Inside, the floor is likely covered with tatami mats. Once your upper body is through, you bring your knees forward, perhaps turning slightly as you fully enter the room to stand, or rather, to immediately kneel again on the tatami. There's no triumphant standing moment. Humility is key throughout. Historians debate whether the precise technique involved sliding on one's knees versus a more hands and feet shuffle, likely varying based on school of tea and individual flexibility. Let's just say it probably wasn't elegant the first few times for anyone. Let's be honest, it sounds incredibly awkward, doesn't it? You can almost picture the muffled thuds and surprised grunts echoing through centuries of tea ceremonies. Imagine trying to do this in bulky winter robes, or if you happen to be particularly tall or generously proportioned. It's a built-in equalizer that transcends mere philosophy and gets right down to biomechanics. There's a certain gentle humor in picturing the most powerful figures of the land, essentially wriggling into a tiny room like oversized toddlers. It's a quirky tidbit that sometimes, for very rare occasions or specific architectural styles, a slightly larger, less demanding entrance called a Gucci might exist, often used by the host or for carrying in larger items. But the Nijiriguchi remained the symbolic heart of the wabi-style tea entrance. Some sources suggest that the small size also helped maintain the intimate, insulated atmosphere of the tea room, conserving heat in winter and enhancing the feeling of a secluded world within a world. It wasn't just about making lords feel awkward, probably. As you slide through, the dim, tranquil interior of the chashitsu begins to reveal itself. The light shifts filtered through paper shoji screens. The scent changes from the damp earth of the Roji to the subtle aroma of tatami, old wood, and perhaps the faint, clean smell of the hearth ashes. The sounds of the outside world fade almost completely. You've passed through the threshold, not just physically, but mentally. The awkwardness of the entrance serves its purpose. You're grounded, you're present, and you've definitely left any sense of self-importance snagged on the doorframe. Now, inside, the quiet anticipation builds. What happens next in this meticulously ordered little universe? You find your designated spot and kneel, waiting, composing yourself after your brief, undignified journey through the wall. The air hums with unspoken rules. Before you even reach that tiny, humbling door, the Nijiriguchi, however, there was usually another stage, another layer of quiet preparation. Depending on the specific layout of the tea garden and the formality of the occasion, guests often first gathered in a designated waiting area. This might be a simple, roofed structure called a machiai, or perhaps a more open bench arrangement known as a koshikake machiai. Think of it as a pre-tea room lounge, but without the questionable muzak and overpriced snacks. Its purpose was elegantly simple: to provide a tranquil space for guests to assemble, compose themselves, and wait for the host's signal to proceed towards the tea house itself. So, picture yourself arriving a little early. Punctuality is, unsurprisingly, paramount in the world of tea ceremony etiquette. Arriving late is a significant disruption, while arriving too early might inconvenience the host who is meticulously finalizing preparations. There's a sweet spot, a window of acceptable earliness. You'd make your way through the outer part of the Roji garden path we just mentally traversed, perhaps leaving your outer coat or any unnecessary baggage here. It's a space designed for shedding the mundane. Inside the machiai, or seated on the koshikake machiai, the atmosphere is one of profound quietude. This is not the time for catching up on gossip or discussing the price of rice in Edo. Conversation, if any, is minimal, hushed, and generally focused on appreciating the surroundings or the anticipation of the ceremony. Mostly, though, silence reigns. You are expected to sit calmly, often in seiza, kneeling with buttocks resting on heels. Though perhaps slightly more relaxed postures might be permissible here than inside the tea room proper. Your focus should be outward, on the carefully curated view of the garden, or inward, continuing the mental cleansing process begun on the Roji path. This waiting period isn't just dead time, it's an active part of the ritual. It allows guests to synchronize, to settle into a shared rhythm of quiet expectation. It also gives the host those crucial final moments to ensure everything within the chashitsu is perfect, the water temperature just right, the scroll hung perfectly, the flowers arranged with seemingly effortless grace. You might notice other guests arriving, acknowledging them with a silent, subtle bow, maintaining the serene atmosphere. There's a shared understanding, a collective participation in the deliberate slowing of time, often near the machi, or somewhere along the path before the main sukubai purification basin. You might find another, simpler water basin, perhaps an ensaki. This could be used for a preliminary rinse of the hands and mouth, a further symbolic cleansing, before the more formal purification closer to the tea room. Historians sometimes debate the exact ritual distinctions and placements of these various water basins, suggesting their roles evolved over time and varied between different tea schools. Was the ensaki purely functional, or did it carry its own layer of symbolic meaning distinct from the sokubai? It's one of those quiet little details scholars can ponder over cups of, well, probably tea. Here's a quirky tidbit related to preparations before even entering the Roji, or sometimes upon arrival at the machi, guests would typically change into fresh, clean white tabi. These are the traditional Japanese split toe socks. Wearing pristine white tabi symbolized purity and respect for the host and the clean space of the tea room. Imagine turning up in your muddy outdoor sandals, the horror. It's like wearing muddy boots on someone's brand new cream carpet, amplified by a factor of deep cultural significance. Sometimes, hosts would even provide a fresh pair for guests upon arrival. It's a small detail, but crucial to the overall sense of cleanliness and respect. You'd leave your outdoor footwear behind, stepping onto the garden path or into the machi literally cleansed from the feet up. Among the waiting guests, one person holds a special role, the shokyaku, or main guest. This is usually the person with the highest status or the closest relationship to the host. They often take the lead, sitting in the position of honor within the machi and being the first to perform subsequent actions, like purification at the sukubai or entering the tea room. If you weren't the shokyaku, your job was basically to follow their lead respectfully and try not to bump into anything. Less pressure, perhaps, but still requiring constant awareness. Think of it as having a designated etiquette pilot for the group. How do you know when the waiting is over? You listen. The host doesn't usually shout, "Oi, tea's ready." Instead, the signal is subtle. It might be the gentle sound of water being poured or ladled, perhaps audible from the sokubai near the tea room, indicating the host is ready. Sometimes the host might briefly emerge from the tea room and make a silent bow towards the waiting guests, or even just open the Nijiriguchi door slightly. It's a non-verbal cue understood through custom. Another common signal was the host sprinkling water on the stepping stones leading from the machi towards the sokubai and the chashitsu, a gesture known as ochimaizu, symbolizing purification and welcome. Seeing the freshly dampened stones tells you it's time to proceed. Responding to the signal, the guests, led by the shokyaku, would rise silently from the machi. They would then proceed along the final section of the Roji path towards the sokubai for the main purification ritual, which we'll touch on more later, before finally facing the challenge of the Nijiriguchi. This structured waiting, the quiet contemplation, the change into clean tabi, the subtle signals, it all reinforces the deliberate, measured pace of the tea ceremony. It ensures that by the time you do finally wriggle through that tiny door, you're not just physically present, but mentally attuned to the quiet intensity of the experience about to unfold. No rushing, no clamor, just a slow, shared immersion into a world apart. You've waited, you've prepared, you've symbolically cleansed. Now, you are truly ready to crawl. Having successfully navigated the Nijiriguchi, perhaps with slightly less grace than intended, but you made it, you find yourself kneeling, just inside the dimly lit, tranquil space of the chashitsu. The air is still, charged with a quiet energy. Your first instinct might be to look around, take everything in, maybe stretch your cramped legs. Resist that urge. Etiquette governs every movement, especially these initial moments of encounter. The host is likely already present, kneeling in their designated position, often near the hearth's rove where the kettle simmers softly. The formal welcome unfolds not with words, but with a series of precisely executed bows. First is the guest, specifically if you are the shokyaku main guest. You orient yourself towards the Tokonoma, the recessed alcove that serves as the room's focal point. We'll explore that next. You perform a deep, respectful bow towards the scroll and flowers displayed there. This isn't just admiring the decor, it's acknowledging the spirit and theme the host has chosen for this specific gathering. Then, you turn using carefully prescribed movements, often involving pivoting on your knees and moving your hands in a set way across the tatami to face the host. The host, in turn, has been waiting patiently, observing your entrance and initial bow to the Tokonoma. Now, as you face them, the silent conversation begins. The host performs a deep bow, perhaps slightly lower or held slightly longer, depending on the relative status and relationship between host and guest. As the guest, you reciprocate with a similarly deep bow. This isn't a casual nod, it's a slow, deliberate lowering of the head and upper body, hands placed formally on the tatami in front of your knees. The depth and duration of the bow convey respect, humility, and gratitude for the invitation. It's a language without words, understood implicitly by participants. Historians note that the precise angle and form of these bows could be incredibly nuanced, subtly communicating social standing within the seemingly egalitarian space of the tea room. While the Nijiriguchi leveled the entrance, the bowing rituals subtly reintroduced elements of that external hierarchy. After this initial exchange of bows, there might be a brief, almost formulaic verbal greeting. The host might offer a quiet welcome, perhaps commenting on the weather or thanking the guest for coming despite the heat or cold. The guest would reply with equally quiet, formal expressions of gratitude for the hospitality. Even these words are chosen carefully, kept brief and understated. The emphasis remains on non-verbal communication and the shared atmosphere. Think of it like the difference between shouting across a room versus a quiet, meaningful nod. One is jarring, the other deepens the connection. One quirky tidbit regarding these initial moments involves the placement of the sensu, or folding fan. Guests typically carry a small folding fan tucked into their obi sash, even if it's not warm enough to use it for cooling. During bows and formal greetings inside the tea room, the closed fan is often placed on the tatami mat directly in front of the knees, acting as a kind of symbolic boundary or marker of respect. Removing it from the obi and placing it down before bowing signifies shifting into a more formal mode. It's like putting your phone on silent, but far more elegant and involving bamboo and paper. Why a fan? Its exact symbolic meaning here is debated, perhaps representing a respectful distance, a humble barrier, or simply serving as a ritual object to structure the movement. The host doesn't just bow and offer a quiet word, their posture and movements convey volumes. They might kneel in a way that seems both perfectly stable and effortlessly humble. Their handling of any objects, even shifting their position slightly, is done with mindful precision. You as the guest are expected to mirror this quiet attentiveness. Fidgeting, unnecessary movements, or loud sighs are definite no-nos. It's about maintaining the jaku harmony, respect, purity, and tranquility, the four principles often associated with the way of tea, famously articulated by Sen no Rikit. Your silent participation, your controlled movements, your attentive bows, they all contribute to upholding these principles. After the initial greetings and bows between the host and the shokyaku are completed, any subsequent guests, or secondary guests, who have entered would perform similar, though perhaps slightly less elaborate, bows first to the Tokonoma and then to the host, and possibly also a respectful acknowledgement towards the shokyaku. The host acknowledges each guest in turn. It's a carefully choreographed sequence, ensuring everyone feels welcomed yet maintaining the overall calm. Imagine the concentration required. You're not just bowing, you're communicating respect, acknowledging artistry, understanding unspoken cues, and trying desperately not to knock anything over in the small, meticulously arranged space. It's mentally taxing in its own quiet way. No wonder it's considered a meditative practice. The silence isn't empty. It's full of observation, intention, and shared understanding. You've crawled in, you've bowed, you've perhaps exchanged a few hushed words. You are now fully immersed in the ceremony's opening act, seated and waiting for the next phase, which usually involves directing your attention to that all-important alcove, the Tokonoma. The host's silent welcome has set the tone profound, respectful, and utterly focused. Now that the initial bows and greetings are complete, your attention, as guided by the host and the flow of the ceremony, often led by the shokyaku, the main guest, turns formally towards the Tokonoma. This recessed alcove is the spiritual and aesthetic heart of the chashitsu, the tea room. It's not just a decorative shelf. It's a carefully curated display designed to set the theme and tone for the entire gathering. Think of it as the room's meditative focal point, a miniature gallery showcasing profound simplicity. Typically, the Tokonoma features two main elements: a hanging scroll, known as a keikomono or jiku, and a simple flower arrangement called chabana. Sometimes a small incense container might also be present, especially during the charcoal laying ceremony phase. The selection and arrangement of these items are never random. They are deeply considered by the host to reflect the season, a specific occasion, a poetic theme, or a particular philosophical sentiment. It's the host's way of communicating non-verbally with the guests, sharing a moment of beauty or contemplation. So, how do you, the guest, appropriately appreciate this carefully crafted display? You don't just glance over and nod. Oh no, there's etiquette for this too, naturally. After the initial greetings, the shokyaku will typically move closer to the Tokonoma. They will kneel formally a respectful distance away, not right up against it. Then, they will first admire the scroll. This involves looking at it thoughtfully, perhaps reading the calligraphy if it contains text, often Zen phrases, poems, or evocative single characters, and absorbing its meaning or aesthetic quality. The appreciation is done in silence, allowing the artwork to speak for itself. It's considered impolite to immediately start discussing it aloud, unless the host initiates conversation later. After contemplating the scroll, the guest's attention moves to the chabana. This isn't a grand, overflowing bouquet like you might see in Western floral design. Chabana emphasizes naturalness, simplicity, and seasonality. Often, it consists of just a single stem or a very sparse arrangement in a simple vase hennered, which might be made of bamboo, pottery, or bronze. The flowers are chosen to look as they might appear growing wild in a field, perhaps slightly imperfect, maybe even including buds alongside full blooms, suggesting the transient beauty of nature. The guest takes a moment to appreciate the choice of flowers, the vessel, and the overall feeling evoked by the arrangement. Again, this is mostly a silent, internal appreciation. Historians still debate the exact origins of chabana, with some linking it to earlier Buddhist floral offerings, kyuj, and others emphasizing Sen no Riki's influence in stripping away artificiality to achieve profound simplicity. Here's a quirky detail: the way you view these items matters. You typically appreciate the scroll first, as it often sets the primary theme. Then you shift your gaze to the flowers. You might make a slight bow towards the Tokonoma after your quiet appreciation, signifying respect for the host's choices and the objects themselves. You don't touch anything, of course. Breathing too heavily on the priceless calligraphy is probably frowned upon too. Imagine leaving a little condensation cloud on a 15th century Zen master's work awkward. The choice of scroll is particularly significant. It could be a piece of calligraphy by a famous Zen master or monk, a painting often depicting landscapes, nature, or symbolic themes, or sometimes a combination. The meaning might be direct or subtle. A scroll depicting Mount Fuji might be chosen for a winter gathering, evoking crisp air and stability, while one with a simple character like wind, safun, could suggest the coming of spring or the transience of thoughts. Understanding, or at least contemplating, the scroll's message is key to grasping the host's intention for the ceremony. It's like the host handing you a philosophical or poetic key right at the start. The flower vase hennered is also an object of appreciation. Its material, shape, origin, and even its perceived personality contribute to the overall display. A rustic, unglazed pottery vase might complement a wild-looking bloom, enhancing the wabi-sabi feel, while a sleek bronze vase might be paired with a single, elegant camellia. Guests knowledgeable in tea ceremony would subtly notice and appreciate these pairings. Sometimes, a particularly famous or storied utensil might be used, adding another layer of historical or artistic appreciation. After the Shokyaku has taken their time appreciating the Tokonoma, they will move back to their designated seating position, Kyakuza. Then, the next guest, Jikyaku, will move forward to appreciate the alcove in the same respectful, silent manner, followed by any subsequent guests, Susume. Each person takes their turn, ensuring the flow remains smooth and unhurried. It's a shared, yet individual, moment of aesthetic contemplation. This focused appreciation of the Tokonoma serves several purposes. It honors the host's effort and artistic sensibility. It centers the guests' minds on beauty and simplicity, reinforcing the themes of the Roji garden and the Nijiriguchi entrance. And it provides a common, silent ground for connection before the more interactive parts of the ceremony, like sharing tea, begin. You've entered, you've bowed, and now you've taken a quiet moment to engage with the carefully chosen heart of the room. The subtle scent of incense might begin to waft from the kagyu, if the host has placed one, adding another sensory layer. The stage is now set for the next major element, often involving the preparation of the fire that will heat the water for the tea, the charcoal ceremony. Section 6. Having absorbed the quiet beauty of the Tokonoma, you settle back into your kneeling position on the tatami mat. The initial formalities are complete, and the ceremony transitions into its next phase, one that focuses on the very practical yet deeply symbolic act of preparing the fire, the Sumidemae, or charcoal ceremony. This isn't just about getting the water hot. Like everything else, it's a meticulously choreographed ritual, performed with grace and precision by the host, and observed with quiet attention by the guests. It's considered one of the highlights for connoisseurs, showcasing the host's skill and mindfulness. Imagine the host kneeling before the hearth. In cooler months, this is typically a sunken hearth roof cut into the tatami floor. In warmer months, a portable brazier ref row might be used instead. Regardless of the type, the host begins the Sumidemae with a series of precise, almost meditative movements. They will bring in the necessary implements, often contained within a special charcoal basket, sumitori, and arranged on a tray. These tools themselves are objects of aesthetic appreciation, crafted from materials like bamboo, feathers, and metal, each with a specific purpose. The first step often involves cleaning the hearth or brazier. The host might use a pair of metal chopsticks called higashi to handle the existing ash, perhaps arranging it into a specific pattern, like a gentle mountain slope or waves, depending on the season and the school of tea. This isn't just tidying up, it's considered an art form in itself, known as heigata. Then, using a feather brush as habaki, often made from 3 different types of bird feathers, a quirky detail, the host delicately sweeps the edges of the hearth, removing any stray ash particles. The movements are economical, graceful, and utterly focused. You, as the guest, watch in silence, appreciating the host's practiced skill. It's surprisingly mesmerizing, like watching a sculptor carefully prepare their clay. Next comes the laying of the charcoal sumi. This isn't just tossing lumps of barbecue briquettes in. Oh no. Special, high-quality charcoal, often made from oak, is used. It comes in specific shapes and sizes, each with a name and a designated place in the arrangement. The host uses the higashi to carefully place pieces of charcoal into the hearth in a precise order and pattern designed for optimal burning and aesthetic balance. There are different prescribed arrangements depending on the type of hearth and the specific tea gathering. Watching the host select and place each piece is like observing a complex puzzle being solved with utmost serenity. Historians note that the development of these specific charcoal forms and laying techniques evolved significantly during the Muromachi and Usucha, Momoyama periods, alongside the refinement of the tea ceremony itself, reflecting a growing emphasis on ritual purity and aesthetic control. During the charcoal laying, the host will often add incense care to the fire. This is typically done using small pieces of fragrant wood, like sandalwood or agarwood, or specially prepared incense pellets. The host places the incense strategically amongst the charcoal pieces using the higashi. As the charcoal heats up, it gently warms the incense, releasing a subtle, clean fragrance that fills the small space of the chashitsu. This isn't meant to be overpowering like cheap air freshener. It's delicate, intended to purify the air and enhance the atmosphere of tranquility. Remember that little incense container, the kagyu, we mentioned might be in the Tokonoma. The host might formally present the kagi to the shokyaku, main guest for appreciation, before placing the incense in the fire. Admiring the craftsmanship of this small container is another mini ritual within the larger ceremony. Once the charcoal is laid and the incense added, the host might adjust the existing ash around the new charcoal pieces, again using the higashi and possibly other small tools like an ash spoon, heisaji. They might rebuild the ash patterns, ensuring good airflow for the charcoal to burn cleanly and efficiently. The goal is a fire that burns steadily, without smoke, providing the perfect heat to bring the water in the kettle, kama, to the ideal temperature for making tea. The sound of the water beginning to heat in the kettle, often described poetically as matsuke's, the wind in the pines, becomes a subtle auditory focus in the quiet room. Guests observe this entire process, which can take a considerable amount of time, with quiet respect. It's considered impolite to talk during the Sumidemae unless the host specifically engages a guest, perhaps to explain a particular utensil or charcoal arrangement. Your role is to be a silent witness to this act of careful preparation, appreciating the host's dexterity and the symbolic significance of tending the fire, the source of warmth, and the means by which the tea, the heart of the gathering, will be prepared. There's a scholarly debate about whether the intense focus on the Sumidemae was primarily about achieving the perfect water temperature for tea, a technical necessity, or more about its Zen, Buddhist symbolism, the controlled handling of fire representing mastery over passions, the purification aspect, and the mindful engagement with a fundamental element. Perhaps like the Roji path, it's a blend of the practical and the profound. Think about the level of dedication. Learning these precise movements, the names of the charcoals, the patterns of the ash, it takes years of practice. It makes complaining about setting the table seem rather trivial, doesn't it? It's a performance of skill disguised as a simple chore. Once the fire is perfectly set and the kettle is heating, the host may remove the charcoal, laying utensils. The room settles back into stillness, the only sounds being the gentle simmering of the kettle and perhaps the soft crackle of the charcoal. The air is clean, subtly fragrant. The stage is meticulously set for the next act, which often involves serving a light meal, the Kaiseki. Having absorbed the quiet beauty of the Tokonoma, you settle back into your kneeling position on the tatami mat. The initial formalities are complete, and the ceremony transitions into its next phase, one that focuses on the very practical yet deeply symbolic act of preparing the fire, the Sumidemae, or charcoal ceremony. This isn't just about getting the water hot, like everything else. It's a meticulously choreographed ritual, performed with grace and precision by the host, and observed with quiet attention by the guests. It's considered one of the highlights for connoisseurs, showcasing the host's skill and mindfulness. Imagine the host kneeling before the hearth. In cooler months, this is typically a sunken hearth's row cut into the tatami floor. In warmer months, a portable brazier aft row might be used instead. Regardless of the type, the host begins the Sumidemae with a series of precise, almost meditative movements. They will bring in the necessary implements, often contained within a special charcoal basket sumitory and arranged on a tray. These tools themselves are objects of aesthetic appreciation, crafted from materials like bamboo, feathers, and metal, each with a specific purpose. The first step often involves cleaning the hearth or brazier. The host might use a pair of metal chopsticks called higashi to handle the existing ash, perhaps arranging it into a specific pattern, like a gentle mountain slope or waves, depending on the season and the school of tea. This isn't just tidying up, it's considered an art form in itself, known as haigata. Then, using a feather brush hab-ki, often made from 3 different types of bird feathers, a quirky detail, the host delicately sweeps the edges of the hearth, removing any stray ash particles. The movements are economical, graceful, and utterly focused. You, as the guest, watch in silence, appreciating the host's practiced skill. It's surprisingly mesmerizing, like watching a sculptor carefully prepare their clay. Next comes the laying of the charcoal sumi. This isn't just tossing lumps of barbecue briquettes in. Oh no. Special. High-quality charcoal, often made from oak, is used. It comes in specific shapes and sizes, each with a name and a designated place in the arrangement. The host uses the higashi to carefully place pieces of charcoal into the hearth in a precise order and pattern designed for optimal burning and aesthetic balance. There are different prescribed arrangements depending on the type of hearth and the specific tea gathering. Watching the host select and place each piece is like observing a complex puzzle being solved with utmost serenity. Historians note that the development of these specific charcoal forms and laying techniques evolved significantly during the Muromachi and Usucha, Momoyama periods, alongside the refinement of the tea ceremony itself, reflecting a growing emphasis on ritual purity and aesthetic control. During the charcoal laying, the host will often add incense to the fire. This is typically done using small pieces of fragrant wood, like sandalwood or agarwood, or specially prepared incense pellets. The host places the incense strategically amongst the charcoal pieces using the higashi. As the charcoal heats up, it gently warms the incense, releasing a subtle, clean fragrance that fills the small space of the chashitsu. This isn't meant to be overpowering like cheap air freshener. It's delicate, intended to purify the air and enhance the atmosphere of tranquility. Remember that little incense container, the kagyu, we mentioned might be in the Tokonoma. The host might formally present the kogyu to the shokiyaku, main guest, for appreciation before placing the incense in the fire. Admiring the craftsmanship of this small container is another mini-ritual within the larger ceremony. Once the charcoal is laid and the incense added, the host might adjust the existing ash around the new charcoal pieces, again using the higashi and possibly other small tools like an ash spoon, hasaji. They might rebuild the ash patterns, ensuring good airflow for the charcoal to burn cleanly and efficiently. The goal is a fire that burns steadily, without smoke, providing the perfect heat to bring the water in the kettle kamov to the ideal temperature for making tea. The sound of the water beginning to heat in the kettle, often described poetically as matsuke's the wind in the pines, becomes a subtle auditory focus in the quiet room. Guests observe this entire process, which can take a considerable amount of time, with quiet respect. It's considered impolite to talk during the Sumidemae, unless the host specifically engages a guest, perhaps to explain a particular utensil or charcoal arrangement. Your role is to be a silent witness to this act of careful preparation, appreciating the host's dexterity and the symbolic significance of tending the fire, the source of warmth and the means by which the tea, the heart of the gathering, will be prepared. There's a scholarly debate about whether the intense focus on the Sumidemae was primarily about achieving the perfect water temperature for tea, a technical necessity, or more about its Zen Buddhist symbolism, the controlled handling of fire representing mastery over passions, the purification aspect, and the mindful engagement with a fundamental element. Perhaps, like the Roji path, it's a blend of the practical and the profound. Think about the level of dedication. Learning these precise movements, the names of the charcoals, the patterns of the ash, it takes years of practice. It makes complaining about setting the table seem rather trivial, doesn't it? It's a performance of skill disguised as a simple chore. Once the fire is perfectly set and the kettle is heating, the host may remove the charcoal laying utensils. The room settles back into stillness, the only sounds being the gentle simmering of the kettle and perhaps the soft crackle of the charcoal. The air is clean, subtly fragrant. The stage is meticulously set for the next act, which often involves serving a light meal, the Kaiseki. With the fire serenely established and the kettle beginning its soft song of the wind in the pines, the ceremony often transitions to the serving of a light meal, known as Kaiseki or sometimes Chakaseki, to specifically denote the meal served within a tea gathering context. Don't picture a lavish banquet or a multi-course feast. True to the wabi-sabi spirit, Kaiseki is characterized by its simplicity, seasonality, and artful presentation. Its purpose isn't to stuff you full, but rather to gently prepare the palate and stomach for the tea that will follow, particularly the potentially strong Koicha's thick tea. It's also another opportunity for the host to express hospitality and seasonality through carefully chosen ingredients and aesthetically pleasing arrangements. The term Kaiseki Huaishuar itself offers a clue to its humble origins. It literally translates to breast stone. This refers to the Zen Buddhist monastic practice where monks would place warmed stones inside the front folds of their robes, near their stomachs, to ward off hunger pangs during long periods of meditation. Therefore, Kaiseki implies a meal that is just enough to assuage hunger, simple and sustaining rather than indulgent. While modern, high-end Kaiseki cuisine served in restaurants can be elaborate and expensive, the chakaseki served in a tea ceremony retains much of this original spirit of refined austerity. The meal is typically served on individual trays zine brought in by the host. Each dish is presented in carefully selected ceramics or lacquerware that complements the food and the season. The choreography of serving and receiving the meal is, naturally, governed by etiquette. The host presents the tray to the shokyaku main guest, first, who receives it with a bow. The host then serves the other guests in order. As a guest, you wait until everyone has been served, and the host gives a subtle indication as perhaps another bow, or a quiet phrase, before you begin eating. You pick up your chopsticks hashit according to a specific protocol, often involving lifting them with one hand and supporting them with the other before taking a proper grip. Eating is done quietly and mindfully. You should appreciate the appearance of each dish before tasting it, taking small bites and savoring the natural flavors. Slurping soup loudly, though acceptable in some other Japanese dining contexts, or making other noises, is generally avoided in the tranquility of the tea room. Pacing is important. You try to eat at roughly the same speed as the other guests, finishing each dish before moving to the next, unless the serving style dictates otherwise. A standard, though variable, chakaseki sequence might include 1. Mukizuke, a small dish of seasonal sashimi raw fish, or perhaps a dressed vegetable, placed on the far side of the tray, hence mukim, meaning opposite side. 2. Wanmori, a soup, usually clear and delicately flavored, served in a lidded lacquer bowl. Wan. You lift the lid carefully, often placing it upside down beside the bowl, admire the contents, inhale the aroma, and then sip directly from the bowl. No spoon, usually provided for clear soups. 3. Yakimano, a grilled dish, often a small piece of seasonal fish. Sometimes, a dish of steamed rice, a gohan, and pickles. Kate nomino might accompany these, or be served towards the end. The exact composition varies greatly depending on the host, the time of day. A noon gathering, shigo, might have a more substantial meal than an early morning, akatsuki, gathering, the season, and the formality of the event. Historians debate the precise point at which chakaseki formalized its structure, evolving from simple monastic fare to the multi-dish sequence we recognize today, likely solidifying during the Edo period alongside the codification of tea schools. Sake, a rice wine, is often served during the kaiseki. The host will offer sake, typically warmed in small cups, sakazuki. There's etiquette for pouring and receiving sake too, involving holding the cup correctly and often taking a sip before placing it down. It's meant to complement the food and encourage a relaxed atmosphere, though consumption is generally moderate. Trying to get rowdy after 3 thimbles of sake would definitely break the wa harmony. A quirky tidbit about kaiseki etiquette relates to cleaning your bowls after finishing the soup or rice. It's customary for the guest to wipe the inside of the bowl clean with a piece of paper, keishi, that they carry folded in the breast of their kimono, or tucked away discreetly if wearing modern clothes. Sometimes, a small amount of hot water might be offered by the host to rinse the bowls, which the guest then drinks before wiping. This practice emphasizes purity and consideration for the host, who will later clean the dishes. It's like washing your plate before handing it back, very considerate. Leaving bowls messy is a definite fox pass. Once the meal is finished, you signal this by placing your chopsticks down correctly on the tray, often resting them across a bowl according to convention. The host will then clear the trays, again starting with the shokyaku. The movements are unhurried, maintaining the peaceful atmosphere. The kaiseki portion provides a gentle interlude, a moment of shared, quiet enjoyment of simple, seasonal flavors. It bridges the gap between the intense focus of the charcoal ceremony and the imminent arrival of the main event, the tea itself. It allows for a slightly more relaxed, though still highly structured, interaction. You've tended the fire vicariously. You've shared a meal prepared with care. Now, cleansed, nourished, and perhaps slightly warmed by a sip of sake, you are ready for the profound experience of sharing Koicha. But first, there's usually a brief pause, a moment to step back out into the garden. Section 8, after the quiet satisfaction of the Kaiseki meal and the clearing of the trays, the tea ceremony often incorporates a brief, structured intermission known as the Nakadacha Joni, literally middle departure, or going outside. This isn't a casual smoke break or a chance to check your imaginary Edo period pager. It's a deliberate pause, a moment for guests to step back out of the intense intimacy of the chashitsu and into the natural world of the Roji garden once more, while the host makes final preparations for serving the tea, particularly the thick tea koicha. The signal for the nakadachi is given by the host, perhaps through a quiet suggestion or simply by beginning the actions that necessitate the guest's temporary departure. Following the lead of the shokyaku, main guest, you and the other guests rise silently from your kneeling positions. You exit the tea room, typically using the same humbling Nijiriguchi you crawled through earlier, though sometimes a separate, slightly larger service entrance, kataguchi, might be used for exiting during the nakadachi, depending on the tea house layout and school tradition, one of those specific points of etiquette that tea masters might gently correct you on. Historians suggest the practice of nakadachi became more common as the tea ceremony evolved to include the Kaiseki meal, providing a necessary pause for both host and guests. Once outside, you don't just wander off aimlessly. You usually return to the waiting arbors, kashikake machiide, where you might have assembled before the ceremony began, or simply find a designated spot within the Roji garden designed for this brief respite. The purpose of this intermission is multifaceted. For the guests, it's a chance to refresh the senses, perhaps stretch legs subtly, though still maintaining decorum, and quietly contemplate the first part of the ceremony, the garden approach, the entry, the appreciation of the Tokonoma, the charcoal ritual, and the shared meal. The transition back into the natural light and air of the garden provides a contrast to the dim, focused interior of the tea room, perhaps allowing a deeper appreciation of both spaces. For the host, the nakadachi is a crucial, practical interval. With the guests temporarily absent, they can perform necessary tasks without disrupting the serene atmosphere. This usually involves sweeping the tea room meticulously, changing the scroll and flowers in the tokonoma if it's a very formal or long gathering, though often the initial display remains, replenishing the water in the kettle kama and making the final, precise arrangements of the tea utensils. A gut needed for preparing and serving the koicha. This includes bringing out the tea caddy chaired, containing the powdered green tea basmati for the thick tea, the tea bowl at Chawan, the tea whisk chasen, and the tea scoop chishaku. Everything must be perfectly clean and precisely placed for the next stage. Silence or very hushed conversation is generally maintained among the guests during the nakadaki. It's a continuation of the meditative mood, not a break from it. You might focus on the sounds of the garden, the trickle of water from the sukabai, the rustle of leaves, the chirp of a bird, allowing the mind to remain calm and receptive. It's a moment of quiet anticipation for the ceremony's culmination. A quirky tidbit relates to bathroom breaks. If nature calls, the nakadachi is the designated, discreet time to use the facilities. Tea gardens often included a simple, aesthetically pleasing outhouse called a sechin, usually located discreetly along a side path. Even this mundane necessity was integrated into the overall design and philosophy, often featuring natural materials and maintaining the rustic simplicity, wabi of the surroundings. You wouldn't find bright plastic fixtures here. Using the sechin would still involve quiet movements and maintaining the overall sense of respect for the space. It's probably the most zen trip to the loo you could imagine. How do you know when the nakadachi is over and it's time to return to the chashitsu? Again, the signal is subtle and often auditory. The host, having completed their preparations inside, will strike a gong dora, or a wooden clapper, high shiji a specific number of times. This resonant sound cuts cleanly through the garden's quiet, signaling that the second seating, gozairi, is about to begin. It's a call back to focus, an invitation to enter the sacred space for the sharing of tea. Upon hearing the signal, the guests, again led by the Shokyaku, prepare to re-enter. Before approaching the Nijiriguchi, they typically perform the ritual purification at the Tsukubai water basin once more. We touched on this basin earlier in the Roji description. Now, the actions are performed with practiced care. You kneel before the low stone basin. Using a bamboo ladle Hishiku provided, you scoop fresh water. First, you pour some over your left hand, then your right hand. Then, you pour water into the palm of your left hand and rinse your mouth, spitting the water out discreetly onto the pebbles surrounding the basin, not back into the basin itself. Finally, you rinse your left hand again and tip the ladle vertically, allowing the remaining water to run down the handle, symbolically purifying the ladle itself before placing it back where you found it. This ritual cleansing reinforces the themes of purity seat necessary for partaking in the tea. Refreshed, purified, and called back by the resonant gong, you approach the Nijiriguchi once more. The anticipation is palpable. The Nakadachi has served its purpose, creating a distinct break and heightening the significance of the re-entry. You slide through the small opening again, ready for the most profound part of the ceremony, the sharing of the thick tea, Koicha. The brief return to the garden has reset the scene, allowing the intensity of the tea sharing to stand out even more clearly. You've re-entered the chashitsu, purified and focused after the nakadeki. The air feels different now, charged with anticipation. The host is kneeling serenely before the meticulously arranged tea utensils. The kettle akama sings softly over the glowing charcoal. This is the pinnacle of the tea gathering. The moment everything has been building towards the preparation and sharing of koicha, the thick tea. This isn't your everyday cuppa. Koicha is a profound, intense experience, shared communally from a single bowl, embodying the deepest principles of the way of tea. First, what exactly is thick tea? Unlike the thinner, frothier Usucha often served towards the end of a ceremony, or in less formal settings, Koicha uses a much higher grade of matcha powder, typically sourced from the youngest, most tender leaves of older tea bushes, which yield a smoother, sweeter, more complex flavor profile. A mainstream fact, this premium quality matcha is significantly more expensive and less bitter than standard grades. Furthermore, a much larger quantity of matcha powder is used relative to the amount of hot water, creating a consistency that's less like a beverage and more like a thick, velvety paint or a warm, liquid jade. It's potent both in flavor and in its cultural significance. Preparing it correctly requires skill, and the right conditions, water temperature, needs to be slightly lower than for Usucha to avoid bitterness. You watch as the host commences the preparation with movements that are fluid, economical, and imbued with meditative focus. They might first ritually purify the tea caddy chair, often a small, treasured ceramic container holding the precious koicha powder, and the tea scoop cheshaku, usually carved from bamboo, using a folded silk cloth called a fukusa. This purification is symbolic, performed with precise, practiced folds and wipes. Then, the host carefully opens the chair and uses the chashaku to scoop a generous amount of the vibrant green matcha powder into the tea bowl of Chawan. It seems like a lot of powder, almost alarmingly so if you're used to thin tea. Next, the host takes hot water from the kettle using the bamboo ladle Hishiku and pours just the right amount over the matcha in the bowl. Now comes the crucial part, the kneading and whisking. Using the bamboo whisk chasen, the host doesn't whip the tea into a froth like with Usucha. Instead, they use slow, deliberate, almost kneading motions, blending the powder and water thoroughly to create that smooth, thick, luminescent green liquid. There should be no foam, just a glossy, viscous consistency. The process is quiet, intense, demanding the host's full attention. The only sounds are the soft whisking against the ceramic bowl and the gentle simmer of the kettle. Once the koicha is perfectly prepared, the host presents the bowl. It's offered first to the shokyaku, the main guest. The host places the bowl on the tatami mat between them and the guest. The shokyaku then shuffles forward slightly on their knees to retrieve it. This is where the intricate guest etiquette kicks in, a delicate dance of respect and shared experience. The shokyaku makes a bow to the host, and often a slight acknowledging bow to the next guest, jikyaku, signifying, "Excuse me for going first." They then pick up the bowl with their right hand, placing it in the palm of their left hand for support. Before raising it to drink, they lift the bowl slightly in a gesture of respect towards the host and the tea. Now comes the rotation. The shokyaku rotates the bowl clockwise, usually 2/4 turns or 1/2 turn depending on the specific tea school's tradition. The purpose is to avoid drinking from the bowl's front, the side considered most aesthetically pleasing, often featuring a maker's mark or a particularly interesting glaze pattern. Drinking from the front would be like taking the best slice of cake all for yourself, subtly disrespectful. Then, the shokyaku takes 3 distinct sips of the thick tea, not gulps but slow, mindful sips, appreciating the intense, rich yet smooth and often surprisingly sweet umami flavor. Imagine the texture thick, coating the tongue, profoundly green. After the 3rd sip, sometimes it might be 3.5 sips, the traditions vary slightly. The guest lowers the bowl. Now for the slightly awkward, but crucial part, wiping the rim. The guest takes their keishi paper, or sometimes a dedicated finger, wiping paper called Koicha, fukin provided by the host, and carefully wipes the exact spot on the bowl's rim where their lips touched. This ensures the bowl is clean for the next person. A quirky tidbit, there's even a specific technique for this wipe, sometimes involving a precise fold of the paper and a single, clean motion. Just casually smudging it would be horrifyingly uncouth. It's intimate, perhaps slightly strange to modern sensibilities, but deeply ingrained in the ritual. Having wiped the rim, the shokyaku rotates the bowl back counter-clockwise to its original orientation. They then pass the bowl to the jikyaku, the second guest, who has shuffled forward slightly to receive it. The jikyaku repeats the entire process. Bow to the shokyaku, receive the bowl, raise it in respect, rotate it clockwise, take 3 sips, wipe the rim clean, rotate it back, and pass it to the next guest. This continues down the line until the last guest, Sumi, has taken their sips. The atmosphere during the sharing of Koicha is one of profound silence and shared focus. All attention is on the bowl, the tea, and the ritual actions. It fosters a unique sense of intimacy and connection among the participants, all partaking from the same vessel. Historians sometimes debate whether the practice of sharing a single bowl originated from purely practical considerations. High-quality tea bowls were expensive and rare, or if it was conceived from the outset as a powerful symbol of unity and the breaking down of social barriers within the sacred space of the chashitsu. Perhaps it was a convergence of both practicality and philosophy. Regardless of its origins, the act carries immense symbolic weight. When the last guest has finished, they take an extra moment to admire the bowl more closely before returning it to the shokyaku, who then returns it to the host. The Koicha ceremony, the solemn heart of the gathering, is complete. A deep sense of calm, connection, and perhaps slight caffeine intensity settles over the room. You've participated in the core ritual, sharing a single bowl of precious tea in a chain of gestures refined over centuries. The intense, shared experience of the Koicha is over. The single, precious bowl has made its journey through the guests and returned to the host, but the interaction with the tea utensils isn't finished yet. Following the Koicha, or sometimes after the subsequent Usucha sin-tea, comes a crucial phase dedicated to the appreciation of the specific implements used, particularly the tea bulbul's chawan from which the Koicha was drunk, and often the tea caddy chair and the tea scoop chashako. This is called heiken, or viewing, and it allows guests to admire the craftsmanship and history of these objects up close, guided by yet another layer of precise etiquette. After the Koicha bowl is returned, the host may ritually clean it using hot water from the kettle and the chasen a whisk, wiping it dry with the chakin and linen wiping cloth. Then the shokyaku main guest will formally request permission to examine the utensils, diga no heiken o negamasu, or a similar phrase, meaning, I request the viewing of the utensils. The host acknowledges this request with a bow. The host then carefully prepares the items for viewing. They might re-purify the chair and chashaku with the fukusa silk cloth before placing them, along with the now empty and clean Koicha bowl chawan, on the tatami mat in a specific arrangement accessible to the guests. Sometimes the silk pouch shifuku that protected the chair is also presented for viewing. Led by the shokyaku, the guests move closer, one by one or sometimes as a small group, maintaining respectful kneeling postures. The appreciation begins, typically focusing first on the chair. The guest carefully picks up the tea caddy, being mindful not to smudge it or handle it roughly. They admire its shape, the glaze, the texture of the clay, perhaps the ivory lid's futa, which is often intricately carved. These chair were often treasured items, sometimes passed down through generations or created by renowned potters. Their value wasn't just monetary, it lay in their history, their aesthetic qualities, and their association with famous tea masters. Guests might turn the chair slowly, examining it from all angles. Next, attention usually shifts to the chashaku, the tea scoop. Often made of bamboo, chashaku might seem simple, but they too are objects of art and history. Many were carved by famous tea masters or Zen monks, each with its own subtle characteristics: the curve of the shaft, the shape of the scoop, the node in the bamboo. Some even have poetic names made, given by their creators, reflecting a season or a philosophical concept. The guest picks up the chashaku delicately, holding it by the shaft, appreciating its form and balance. A quirky tidbit: some chashaku bear tiny imperfections or markings from the carving process which, in the wabi-sabi aesthetic, are not seen as flaws but as points of unique character to be appreciated. Handling a scoop carved centuries ago by a legendary figure must feel quite profound. Talk about connecting with history. Finally, the focus returns to the Chawan, the tea bowl used for the Koicha. Even though they drank from it, guests now have the chance to examine it more thoroughly. They pick it up carefully, supporting it with both hands as if cradling something precious. They admire its overall shape, the feel of the ceramic in their hands, the way the glaze has run or pooled, the foot ring day on the bottomus, which often bears the potter's mark, or interesting textural details. They might turn it slowly, recalling the tactile sensation of drinking the thick tea from it just moments before. The rotation etiquette used for drinking is mirrored here. You handle the bowl with care, appreciating its front, but perhaps focusing on other details as well. During the heiken, quiet conversation is often permitted, unlike during the koicha sharing itself. The shokyaku might ask the host about the origin or history of a particular piece. What is the name origin of this chair? The host will answer quietly and concisely, providing information about the potter, the kiln, the age, or any significant provenance. This exchange is part of the appreciation, adding depth to the viewing experience. However, it's not a lengthy critique session. Comments are usually appreciative and restrained. Gushing excessively, or conversely, offering unsolicited criticism would be highly inappropriate. Historians suggest this practice of heiken helped to cultivate connoisseurship among the samurai and wealthy merchant classes during the Edo period, fostering a deep appreciation for ceramic art and craftsmanship that became intrinsically linked with tea culture. There are specific rules for handling these precious objects. You generally avoid passing them directly from hand to hand. Instead, one guest places an item carefully back on the tatami before the next guest picks it up. You handle items over the tatami mats, minimizing the risk of dropping them onto a hard surface. When examining a bowl, you cradle it. When examining a scoop or caddy, you hold it securely but lightly. It's about showing maximum respect for objects that are often fragile, valuable, and imbued with history and artistic intent. Imagine being the guest who fumbles the shogun's favorite tea caddy. You wouldn't just break a piece of pottery. You'd probably cause a major diplomatic incident. No pressure! Once all guests who wish to view the items have done so, the shokyaku indicates they are finished. The utensils are carefully returned to their original viewing positions. The host then retrieves them, again with precise, respectful movements, perhaps giving a final bow to acknowledge the guest's appreciation. This heiken phase serves as an intellectual and aesthetic coda to the intensity of the koicha. It allows for a deeper connection with the tools of the ceremony, transforming them from mere functional objects into subjects of focused contemplation. It honors the host's choices, the artisan's skills, and the lineage of tea history. You've not only tasted the tea, but you've now held and appreciated the very vessels and tools that made the experience possible, adding another layer of richness to the unfolding ritual. The ceremony now often transitions to a slightly more relaxed phase, the serving of Usucha, thin tea. Following the intense focus of the Koicha sharing and the quiet contemplation of the Haken, the atmosphere in the chashitsu often shifts subtly. While still maintaining a core of respect and mindfulness, there's a gentle relaxation, a slight easing of the profound formality. This transition often heralds the preparation and serving of Usucha, or thin tea. If Koicha was the solemn, communal heart of the ceremony, Usucha feels more like a refreshing, individual counterpart, though still prepared and received with considerable care and etiquette. So, what distinguishes thin tea? As the name suggests, Usucha uses less matcha powder and more hot water compared to its thick counterpart. While Koicha uses the highest ceremonial grade powder, Usucha can be made with a slightly lower, though still good quality grade. Crucially, the preparation technique is different. Instead of the slow kneading motion used for Koicha, the host uses the bamboo whisk chasen with rapid, brisk movements, often a quick M or W pattern, to whip the tea and water into a frothy, light green liquid topped with a fine foam or waft. The ideal is a creamy, even froth covering the surface. The mainstream fact, the quality of the froth, is often seen as an indicator of the preparer's skill. The resulting tea is lighter in body and flavor, sometimes slightly more astringent than the deep umami of Koicha, but refreshing nonetheless. You watch as the host begins the Usucha preparations. They will again use the fukusa silk cloth to symbolically purify the necessary utensils, perhaps a different tea bowl, Chawan, than the one used for Koicha, or the same one after being thoroughly cleaned. They will also purify the natsum, a specific type of tea caddy typically used for Usucha powder, often lacquered wood, contrasting with the ceramic chair usually used for Koicha, and the chashaku tea scoop. The host scoops a smaller measure of matcha powder into the bowl, usually about 1.5 scoops with the chashaku, compared to the 3 or 4 used for Koicha. Hot water is ladled from the kettle, and then comes the characteristic sound of Usucha preparation, the rapid shaka of the bamboo whisk against the sides and bottom of the bowl. A quirky tidbit: this sound, far from being disruptive, is considered part of the Usucha experience, a lively contrast to the intense silence of the Koicha kneading. The host whisks until the desired froth is achieved, then lifts the whisk smoothly from the center of the bowl, sometimes leaving a slightly raised peak of foam known as the mountain. Here's a key difference from Koicha. Usucha is typically served in individual bowls. The host prepares one bowl at a time, serving each guest sequentially. This immediately creates a different dynamic, less about communal sharing from one vessel, more about individual enjoyment and appreciation. The host offers the first bowl, usually to the shokyaku main guest. The guest retrieves the bowl in the customary way: right hand pickup, placed on left palm, supported by right fingers. A bow of thanks is exchanged. As with Koicha, the guest rotates the bowl slightly clockwise before drinking, typically 1/4 turn or so, again to avoid drinking from the designated front. However, the rotation might feel slightly less rigorously prescribed than for the more formal Koicha. The guest then drinks the entire bowl of Usucha. It's not sipped slowly over several turns like Koicha. It's meant to be drunk relatively quickly. While the froth is fresh, you drink it all, appreciating the lighter flavor and the texture of the foam. Since you have your own bowl, there's no need to wipe the rim afterwards. Once finished, the guest might take a moment to admire the bowl, similar to the Heiken phase but perhaps more briefly, appreciating its form and glaze now empty. Then, the bowl is rotated back to its original orientation and returned to the host. While the host prepares the bowl for the next guest, jikyaku, the shokyaku might relax slightly. The host repeats the process: prepare, whisk, serve for each guest in turn. Another important element often accompanying Usucha is the serving of sweets, specifically Higashi gengwada. These are dry sweets, often made from fine, grained Japanese sugar, wezenban and rice flour, pressed into beautiful, intricate shapes reflecting the seasoned maple leaves in autumn, cherry blossoms in spring, perhaps snowflakes in winter. They are usually served on a special tray or paper before the Usucha arrives. Guests take a sweet and eat it before drinking the tea. The sweetness of the Higashi provides a pleasant contrast to the slight bitterness of the Usucha, cleansing the palate and enhancing the tea's flavor. This contrasts with the often more substantial, moist sweet omogashi, sometimes served before the richer Koicha. Sometimes, depending on the length and style of the gathering, the host might offer guests a second bowl of Usucha. The overall pace feels less intensely structured than the Koicha segment. While still governed by etiquette, the atmosphere allows for slightly more relaxed observation and enjoyment. There's often debate among tea practitioners and historians about the relative significance of Koicha versus Usucha. Some view Koicha as the true essence of a formal tea gathering chiji, with Usucha being a secondary, lighter conclusion. Others argue that Usucha allows for a different kind of appreciation and connection, perhaps more accessible. Is Usucha a lesser tea, or simply a different facet of the way of tea, embodying lightness and individual refreshment alongside the profound communion of Koicha? It likely represents a complementary experience, completing the sensory journey. Having finished your bowl of Usucha and savored the delicate sweetness of the Higashi, you feel a sense of completion. The ceremony is drawing towards its close. The host may begin the cleaning of the utensils used for the Usucha, signaling the final stages. You've journeyed from the garden path to the shared intensity of thick tea, and now enjoyed the individual refreshment of thin tea. The end is approaching, but even the departure is governed by its own set of graceful rules. The individual bowls of frothy Usucha have been enjoyed, the delicate Higashi sweets savored. A sense of quiet satisfaction pervades the chashitsu. As the host begins the final, meticulous cleaning of the tea utensils used for the thin tea, you might find yourself reflecting not just on the tastes and sights, but on the sounds, or rather, the profound lack of sound for much of the ceremony. In our modern world, silence can often feel awkward, a vacuum we rush to fill with chatter. But within the traditional Japanese tea ceremony, silence is not empty. It's a respected presence, a vital component of the experience. Conversation, when it occurs, is handled with as much care and precision as the tea whisking itself. Knowing what not to say is arguably more important than knowing what to say. The guiding principles of the way of tea, harmony wav, respect ki, purity si, and tranquility jaku extend directly to verbal communication. Idle gossip, loud arguments, boastful pronouncements, or complaints about the weathers, or your aching knees from kneeling would shatter the carefully cultivated atmosphere. The goal is shared presence and mutual respect, and the conversation, or lack thereof, must support this. Think of it as conversational wabi, sabi finding profound meaning in simple, understated exchanges, rather than complex or showy dialogue. So, when is it appropriate to speak? As we've seen, certain phases demand near total silence from the guests. The solemn sharing of Koicha, the focused observation of the Sumidemae charcoal ceremony. Interrupting these with casual remarks would be a serious breach of etiquette. However, other moments offer small windows for quiet verbal interaction. The heiken, the viewing of the utensils after Koicha, is a prime example. As the main guest Shokyaku examines the tea caddy or bowl, they might politely ask the host about its name, origin, or maker. What is the poetic name Ashmave of this chashaku? Or might I inquire about the kiln where this Chawan was fired? These questions show genuine interest and appreciation, deepening the experience. The host's replies are typically concise and informative, sticking to the facts or the known history of the object. During the serving of Usucha, the atmosphere might lighten slightly, potentially allowing for very brief, appreciative comments about the tea's very refreshing bowl, or the sweets. These Higashi perfectly capture the feeling of spring. Again, the initiative usually rests with the host, or perhaps the shokyaku. Guests generally respond rather than initiate new topics. It's a subtle dance, sensing the mood and following the established rhythm. Imagine trying to launch into a detailed story about your cat during the host's meticulous whisking, the mental equivalent of tripping over the Tokonoma. The content of any conversation is crucial. Topics should ideally revolve around the immediate experience, the beauty of the scroll or flowers in the Tokonoma. The craftsmanship of the utensils, the quality of the tea, the feeling of the season as reflected in the garden or the room's appointments. Praising the host's skill to mate is acceptable, but should be done sincerely and without effusive flattery. Mainstream fact: discussion topics were intentionally kept neutral and aesthetic, avoiding potentially divisive subjects like politics, business dealings, or personal grievances, which were considered unsuitable for the pure, detached atmosphere of the tea room. It's about sharing observations that enhance the collective appreciation, not diverting attention to oneself or external matters. Listening, therefore, becomes an active skill in the tea ceremony. You listen to the host's quiet explanations, to the subtle sounds of the ritual, the whisk, the simmering water, the crackle of charcoal, and even to the silence itself. You observe the non-verbal cues, the host's posture, the other guest's attentiveness. Filling every pause with noise is discouraged. Comfortable silence allows for reflection and absorption. It's the antithesis of a noisy networking event. Here's a quirky, related point asking about the monetary value or cost of any of the tea utensils. No matter how exquisite or rare they appear, is considered extremely impolite. It reduces an object of aesthetic and historical significance to a mere commodity, violating the spirit of wabi-sabi, which values intrinsic beauty over material worth. Admire the artistry, appreciate the history, but never ask, how much did this raku bowl set you back? It's the ultimate tea ceremony faux pas, like asking your host how much their house cost during dinner. There's an ongoing scholarly discussion about the precise function of this restrained communication style. Was it purely a reflection of Zen Buddhist ideals of mindfulness and detachment from worldly chatter? Or did it also serve a practical social function, particularly in the rigidly hierarchical Edo period? By limiting conversation to safe, aesthetic topics and emphasizing silence, the tea ceremony might have provided a neutral ground where individuals from different social strata, samurai, wealthy merchants, artisans, monks could interact within a shared framework of etiquette, minimizing potential friction or awkwardness. The rules of speech or silence helped maintain harmony's wav in a potentially complex social mix. Think about the subtle skills involved: reading the room, knowing when to speak and when to remain silent, choosing words carefully, listening intently, appreciating non-verbal cues. It's a form of communication that prioritizes presence and shared experience over individual expression. In a world saturated with constant noise and information, the quiet discipline of the tea room offers a different way of connecting. You've navigated the meal, the teas, the viewing of utensils, and now you understand the silent language of the space. The ceremony is winding down, and even the final stages of cleaning and preparation for departure are imbued with this same quiet dignity. The last sips of Usucha have been taken, the final appreciative comments on the utensils perhaps exchanged. The host now begins the concluding sequence of actions, primarily focused on the ritual cleanings, shime, of the key utensils used for making the thin tea. Just as the preparation was a performance of mindful grace, so too is the cleaning. This isn't just about washing up, it's a demonstration of respect for the tools, a way of bringing the ceremony to a gentle, orderly close, and, like everything else, it follows a prescribed choreography observed quietly by the guests. You watch as the host focuses on the Chawan tea bowl, just used for the last guest's Usucha, the chasen whisk, and the chashako tea scoop. The host might first add a measure of fresh hot water from the kettle kama into the tea bowl. Then, using the chasen, they rinse the whisk in the hot water within the bowl, examining it carefully to ensure it's clean and undamaged. The movements are deliberate, not hurried scrubbing. The whisk is then gently tapped on the rim of the bowl to shake off excess water and placed aside in its designated spot. Next, the host discards the rinsed water from the chawan into the kensui, the waste water container, which has been positioned discreetly throughout the tea-making process. The host then takes the chakin, a rectangular white linen cloth used specifically for wiping the tea bowl, dips it into the remaining hot water in the kettle, or sometimes uses fresh cold water, depending on the procedure, wrings it out, and meticulously wipes the inside and rim of the chawan. The folding and handling of the chakin are precise, ensuring the bowl is left perfectly clean and dry. The clean bowl is then placed down. Now attention turns to the chashaku. The host picks up the tea scoop and, using the fukusa, that important folded silk cloth carried by the host, often tucked into their obi sash, they carefully wipe the scoop clean. The fukusa is symbolic of purity, and its use elevates the simple act of wiping into a ritual gesture. The way the host folds, unfolds, and manipulates the fukusa is itself a small performance, honed through years of practice. The mainstream fact: the fukusa is almost always silk, often purple for male hosts and red or orange for female hosts, though variations exist. Its condition and the way it's handled reflect the host's training and attention to detail. The host might fold the fukusa into a specific shape before wiping the scoop, then perhaps refold it differently to give it a final polish. There are numerous established ways to handle the fukusa sabaki, specific to different tea schools like Urasenki, Omotsenki, Mushak Jisenki, and even specific procedures within those schools. Watching a skilled host manipulate the fukusa can be surprisingly captivating. It flows through their hands with practiced ease, transforming a simple square of silk into a tool of ritual purification. It's like watching intricate origami performed with fabric. Quirky tidbit: sometimes, if the chashaku is particularly noteworthy, perhaps old, or made by a famous master, the host might perform an extra, more elaborate wiping sequence, drawing subtle attention to its special quality without needing to say anything. It's another layer of non-verbal communication, understood by knowledgeable guests. Once the chashaku is wiped clean, it's placed carefully across the now clean chawan, or sometimes rested on the natsume thin tea caddy. The host may then also wipe the natsume itself with the fukusa before placing it alongside the bowl. This entire cleaning process is done with the same calm focus and economy of movement that characterized the tea preparation. Guests observe quietly, appreciating the host's skill and the sense of closure these actions bring. It signals that the core tea, serving part of the ceremony, is definitively over. There's a quiet beauty in watching these simple, functional actions performed with such ritual care. It reinforces the idea that every part of the process, from setting the charcoal to wiping the final bowl, deserves mindful attention. There's some scholarly discussion around the specific symbolism of the fukusa sabaki. Is it purely about achieving ritual cleanliness, or do the complex folds and movements carry deeper meanings, perhaps related to Buddhist mudras, hand gestures, or other symbolic traditions? Like much in the tea ceremony, it likely operates on multiple levels: practical, aesthetic, and symbolic simultaneously. The act of purification with the fukusa reaffirms the principle of size purity one last time before the gathering concludes. With the main utensils cleaned and neatly arranged, the host might add fresh water to the kettle from the mizusashi, cold water container, to cool it slightly, signaling the fire will soon be left to die down. They may then make a final bow, indicating the formal tema procedure is complete. The quiet rhythm of wiping, folding, and placing objects creates a calming effect, gently guiding the guests' minds towards the ceremony's end. You've witnessed the cycle: preparation, sharing, and now, the respectful concluding actions. The folding of the fukusa, seemingly simple, encapsulates the dedication and hidden complexity underlying the entire experience. Throughout our journey into the tea ceremony, we've hinted at a crucial underlying principle: seasonality. The way of tea is deeply attuned to the rhythms of nature, and this sensitivity permeates every aspect of the gathering, from the Roji garden path to the final sip of Usucha. A tea ceremony held in the vibrant bloom of spring will feel distinctly different from one conducted amidst the crisp austerity of winter, not just because of the temperature, but because the host deliberately adapts the core, the utensils, the food, and even the underlying mood to reflect the specific time of year. This constant adaptation ensures that each tea gathering, even if following the same basic structure, feels fresh and uniquely connected to the present moment. Let's revisit the elements we've encountered and see how seasonality plays out. Remember the Tokonoma, the alcove display. This is perhaps the most obvious place where the season is expressed. The hanging scrolls kakemono might feature calligraphy, or a painting directly related to the time of year, cherry blossoms for spring, perhaps a depiction of the moon for an autumn gathering, or snow-covered bamboo in winter. The chabana, the flower arrangement, is intrinsically seasonal. The host chooses flowers that are currently blooming naturally, arranging them simply to evoke the feeling of the fields or mountains outside. You wouldn't find forced greenhouse tulips in a traditional winter chabana. You'd more likely see a bare branch with interesting character, or perhaps a single, hardy camellia bloom. The choice of vase henner might also change, with heavier pottery or bronze often used in colder months, and lighter bamboo or basket, weave vases appearing in summer. The utensils gut themselves often subtly shift with the seasons. The mainstream tea bowls, Chawan, come in different shapes suited for different times of year. In winter, hosts tend to favor deeper, more cylindrical bowls that help retain the tea's heat and feel warm and substantial in the hands. In summer, shallower, wider bowls are preferred, allowing the tea to cool slightly faster and presenting a broader surface that feels visually cooler and more open. The glazes and designs might also reflect the season, perhaps a motif of maple leaves for autumn, or a cool, watery blue glaze for summer. Even the tea caddies chair and natsumi and tea scoops chashaku might be chosen to harmonize with the seasonal theme, perhaps through their material, shape, or poetic name May. The Kaiseki meal is fundamentally seasonal. The ingredients are chosen at their peak freshness, delicate bamboo shoots in spring, cooling eggplant and cucumber in summer, hardy mushrooms and chestnuts in autumn, root vegetables in winter. The presentation also reflects the season. Summer dishes might be served on glass or light ceramic plates to enhance a feeling of coolness, while winter dishes might arrive in warming lacquerware or rustic pottery. The sake served might be gently warmed in winter or occasionally served chilled in the height of summer. Even the hearth arrangement changes. As mentioned earlier, a sunken hearth row is typically used during the colder months as roughly November to April, providing both literal and visual warmth, evoking a cozy, centered feeling. In the warmer months, May to October, a portable brazier row is used instead. The fothero sits on top of the tatami, feeling lighter and allowing for better air circulation. The placement of the kettle and other utensils around the row versus the fefa row differs, requiring the host to master two distinct sets of procedures Sumidemae. Quirky tidbit, the precise date for switching between the row and efta row, known as row baraki opening the hearth, in autumn, winter, and the reverse in spring, is a significant event in the tea calendar, often marked by special tea gatherings. The Sumidemae, the charcoal laying procedure, also subtly adapts. While the goal is always a clean, efficient fire, the specific arrangement of charcoal pieces might vary slightly between row and fes row seasons, influencing how the heat radiates. The type of incense chosen might also evoke the season, perhaps a fresh, woody scent in spring, or a deeper, more resinous fragrance in winter. The very atmosphere the host seeks to cultivate can shift. Winter ceremonies might emphasize quietude, introspection, and warmth wabi, while summer gatherings might aim for a feeling of coolness, openness, and refreshment sabi applied differently perhaps. The choice of guests, the time of day, early morning tea in summer, perhaps evening tea in winter, all contribute to this seasonal tuning. This deep integration of seasonality prevents the tea ceremony from becoming a static museum-like ritual. It keeps it alive, responsive, and grounded in the natural world. It encourages both host and guest to pay attention to the subtle changes around them, fostering mindfulness and an appreciation for the transient beauty of each moment. There is ongoing discussion among practitioners about how strictly traditional seasonal guidelines should be adhered to in the modern world, especially with global climate change and the year-round availability of many things. However, the core principle remains: the tea ceremony at its best is a reflection of now and is always situated within the larger cycle of the seasons. By adapting decor and utensils, the host isn't just decorating, they are harmonizing the human ritual with the encompassing rhythm of nature. You haven't just attended a tea ceremony, you've attended this specific ceremony, rooted in this particular moment in time. The host has meticulously cleaned the final tea utensils, perhaps placing the whisk and scoop neatly on the clean bowl, or returning the natsume, thin tea caddy, to its proper place. The fukusa has been refolded with practiced ease and tucked back into the host's obi. A sense of quiet finality settles definitively over the chashitsu. The host might perform one last symbolic action, like closing the lid of the cold water container dozen mizusashi completely, signaling that no more water will be drawn, or making a final deep bow towards the guests, indicating the formal proceedings have concluded. The subtle sounds of the kettle and charcoal remain, but the active ritual is complete. Now, the onus shifts to the guest to initiate the departure, guided, as always, by the shokyaku main guest. There isn't usually a specific verbal request to leave, like asking permission. Instead, sensing the host's concluding actions and final bow, the shokyaku understands it's time. They will make a deep, formal bow to the host, expressing gratitude for the entire experience, the meal, the tea, the atmosphere, the host's skill and hospitality. This isn't a quick nod, it's a sincere, lingering gesture of respect. The other guests, Jikyaku and Sum, then follow suit, bowing deeply to the host. They might also make a subtle bow towards the shokyaku, thanking them for leading the way, both literally and figuratively, through the ceremony's intricate etiquette. The host reciprocates these bows, maintaining their serene composure. While the bows are profound, verbal farewells are typically brief and understated. Guests might offer quiet phrases like Taihen oshiko zamashita, everything was delicious, wonderful, or Kekna nadama, arigat go zamashita, thank you for the splendid procedure ceremony. Extravagant praise or prolonged conversation at this point would disrupt the gentle denouement. It's about conveying sincere appreciation concisely. Having expressed their thanks, the guests prepare to exit. This usually happens in reverse order of seniority, meaning the last guest Asumi leaves first, followed by the others, with the shokyaku being the very last guest to depart the tea room. Before heading towards the exit, each guest often takes one final, respectful look towards the tokonoma, acknowledging the scroll and flowers that set the tone for the gathering. It's a silent farewell to the room's aesthetic heart. Then comes the exit itself, usually back through the Nijiriguchi, that same small, crawling in entrance. Yes, you have to wiggle your way out, just as you wiggled your way in. Kneeling before the opening, you slide out feet first this time, retrieving your footwear. Perhaps those clean white tabi are now slightly less pristine after several hours of kneeling, but the effort was appreciated, and any belongings left outside, like your swords if you were a traveling samurai, or maybe just your sensible modern shoes. Mainstream fact, the reverse order of departure, with the main guest leaving last, ensures they can oversee the smooth exit of others and have the final respectful exchange with the host remaining inside it. As you exit, you handle your personal items with care. Your folding fan sensu, which might have been placed before you during bows, is tucked back into your obi or put away discreetly. Every movement, even in departure, strives to maintain the grace and mindfulness cultivated during the ceremony. Emerging from the dim intimacy of the chashitsu back into the Roji garden can feel like stepping between worlds. A quirky tidbit sometimes, the host might subtly signal the absolute final end by making a quiet sound as the last guest exits, like gently closing the Nijiriguchi door from the inside, or perhaps even briefly opening it again slightly after closing it, a gesture known as okuri, rei, a seeing-off bow performed unseen. It's a final silent acknowledgement. Guests don't just vanish after exiting the tea house. They proceed quietly back along the Roji path, the stepping stones guiding their feet once more. The garden, which felt full of anticipation on arrival, now feels imbued with a sense of peaceful completion. The moss seems greener, the stones more solid, the subtle sense perhaps more noticeable after the focused sensory experience inside. You walk slowly, savoring the lingering tranquility. There's some scholarly discussion regarding the exact nature of the host's final farewell. Did the host traditionally accompany the guests back through the garden to the outer gate, or remain unseen within the chashitsu after the last guest departed? Practices likely varied depending on the school of tea, the formality of the occasion, and the relationship between host and guests. Some accounts favor the host remaining inside, preserving the separation of the tea space, while others describe the host seeing the guests off more personally from the garden gate, offering a final bow as they step back into the everyday world. Both approaches have their own subtle implications for the host-guest dynamic and the sense of closure. As you reach the outer gate of the Roji, you might turn back for one last look, perhaps offering a final, silent bow towards the tea house, even if the host is not visible. You step out, leaving the meticulously crafted world of the tea ceremony behind. But hopefully, you carry some of its essence with you, a sense of calm, a heightened awareness of simple beauty, and perhaps a newfound appreciation for the profound elegance hidden within strict etiquette. The bustling sounds of Edo or your modern street return, but the quiet harmony of the chashitsu lingers in your mind. You survived! And maybe, just maybe, you didn't commit too many horrifying etiquette blunders. You leave gracefully carrying the peace of the tea. And now, as the last echoes of the tea ceremony fade, let us gently wind down. The journey through the intricate steps, the silent communications, the shared sips of tea, it all begins to recede, like ripples smoothing out on a quiet pond. Feel the weight of those unspoken rules lift, leaving behind only a soft sense of peace, a quiet appreciation for detail and presence. Imagine the faint scent of matcha and damp moss lingering in the air, a soothing balm for the mind. The rustle of silk, the clink of ceramic, the soft simmer of the kettle, let these sounds become distant murmurs, lulling you further into relaxation. There are no more bows to execute, no more tiny doors to crawl through, no more judgments on how you admire a flower arrangement. You navigated the complexities, real or imagined, and now you can simply rest. Let the focused attention required melt away, replaced by a gentle, drifting awareness. The precision of the ceremony gives way to the soft blur of oncoming sleep, the quiet dignity of the samurai, the mindful grace of the host, the shared tranquility of the guests. Let these impressions soften and merge, becoming part of the background hum of the night. Ease into the stillness, letting go of the details, holding on to the feeling of calm. Allow your breathing to deepen, your muscles to relax completely. The tea ceremony is over. It's time to drift. End of script. Sweet dreams.